Kadosh Boker Tov, Masechet Yevamot Daf Yutet Amud Aleph, a new chapter. Perek Chadash, Perek Shisha Asar. We're talking about now the new chapter, which is the 16th chapter. Says the new Perek, the Mishnah. So the new chapter says like this: Isha Shala Bala V'Tzaratah M'Medinat Hayam. Imagine right now if a woman, her husband and her co-wife, her tzarata, which means her tzara, went to M'Medinat Hayam. So they didn't take her along. She stayed behind, and they went to M'Medinat Hayam. And now what happens is the husband went, and he died. Yeah, but we don't know if maybe he had a child or not. Now remember, if he has a child, she stood up from Yibum. So Isha Shala Bala V'Tzarata M'Medinat Hayam. Ubau came Edim, right? The Amrula, and they said to her, Met Balech, the husband died, Lo Tinaseh. She cannot get married. Yeah, she cannot get married, right? Velo Tityabem. She doesn't also do Yibum. Ad Sheteda Shema Me'uberet Tzarata. So she cannot do anything until she finds out maybe that Tzarata is pregnant. Why? If you remember, we already learned this. If Tzarata is pregnant, so then we wait, right? Now what's going to happen is, if she was pregnant and she has a child, she doesn't need to do Yibum. Because the fact that the husband did have a child, so therefore there's no Yibum. Correct? That is the first part of the Mishnah. Next, Hechal. What happens now if this woman had a mother-in-law in M'Medinat Hayam, and the wife goes and he dies without children? Yeah. So now what happens? It says Ena Chosheshet. She's not going to suspect that maybe now Chamuta did have a child and she still needs to do Yibum. Rather, she's muter in the shuk. Right? Why? She's not going to start to, her mother-in-law is not going to have a child, and then she has to do Yibum. She doesn't have to suspect that. Yatzta Meleah, but if she came out and she was Meleah, she was already pregnant, Chosheshet, we're going to suspect it. Rabbi Yoshua Omer. Rabbi Yoshua says, Ena Chosheshet, we're not going to suspect it. Okay, very good. Says the Gemara. That was the Mishnah. Says the Gemara. My tzarata. What exactly is tzarata? What does that mean here? Right? What does it mean? So it says, Hakamash Malan, let's come to teach you. Lehat tzarahu dechashinan, aval tzarah harite lo chashinan. What does that mean? We are going to be choshesh that maybe she's pregnant, which means the tzarah that went to M'Medinat Hayam with the husband. We're going to suspect that she's pregnant. But if witnesses came and said that she's not pregnant, we're not going to suspect that maybe he got married to another woman and then she became pregnant, right? But rather here, she's muteret to the Yavam, which means like this. If he's already married and he goes with the other wife to M'Medinat Hayam, there we're going to suspect maybe she's pregnant. But let's say he's only married to this wife and he went by himself to M'Medinat Hayam. We're not going to suspect that he got married, right, to someone, okay, over there, and now she's going to be pregnant. That we don't suspect. Okay, so therefore, if he dies, we're going to say that what? Gets married without Yibum. She's allowed to do Yibum, without doing anything. So now the Mishnah said, Lo tinaseh velo tityabem. A woman comes, she does not get married to the shuk, but she does not do the Yibum. Says the Gemara, asked the Gemara, Bishlama Yabum Melo, I understand she cannot do Yibum. Maybe she's pregnant. Maybe the tzarata is pregnant, and that's why she can't do Yibum. Why? Because Kabaga Veshetach Doraita, Veshetach is Doraita. Ela lo tinaseh amai. Why can't she get married to somebody from the shuk? Lalech harov nashim. Go up to the majority of the women. Verov nashim mitabrot v'yaldot. The majority of the women, they are pregnant and then they give birth, which means we're going to say that she didn't become pregnant, and therefore she, right? She gave birth. So says the Gemara, why don't we just say that this is Shitat Rabbi Meir, that we go up to the miut, and therefore he's going to say that the woman is permitted to get married to the shuk because we're going to suspect that maybe she's from the miut, that they do not become pregnant and give birth, right? But according to Chachamim, technically speaking, she should be permitted. So says the Gemara, no. Even if you're going to tell me it's Shitat Rabbanan, when do the rabbis go to the law? Ruba dita kaman. When the robe is here, when the robe is in front of you, then you go in front of the robe. For example, Teisha Chaniyot. You got 9 stores, right? And 9 stores are selling basar kasher, and 1 store is selling basar nevela. And you find 1 piece of meat outside, you don't know from which store. There you go after the rov because it's the rov in front of you. The Sanhedrin or the Sanhedrin, also the same thing. But when you have a rov which is not in front of us, the rabbis do not go after the majority, but rather we're going to suspect for the minority. Okay? Ask the Gemara 1 second. What about a katan uktana? The ruba deleta kamanu. He says 1 second, the majority are not in front of us. And still as we still go up to the majority. The time was going to write a katan uktana, whether it's a katan uktana, which is a yavam or yevama. They don't do ibum or chalitza. These are the words that Rabbi mean. Amrulo, they told Rabbi mean, Yafe amarta shel cholzin. I understand that you cannot do chalitza. How do we know that a katan cannot do chalitza? Because ish katuv beparasha. It says ish by the chalitza. It says in the varim over there, im lo yachpotza ish lakachat tivimto. So it's mashma, it has to be a gadol. Has to be a gadol. Umakshina nisha leish. And we make a hekesh. What's a hekesh? That's the position. Isha to ish, proximity. It's written close by. Because it says v'altayivimto ashara. So therefore, right? Therefore, just like the man has to be an ish, so to the girl has to be an isha. So he says elamatam and miyamin. So then what's the reasoning why we don't do yibum then? Why don't do yibum? Yeah, Elmaleh, he tells them, katan shema imatze saris uktana shema timetze ilanit. And nimtzaim pogin be'erva. He says, you know why we don't do yibum? Very simple. What happens with the katan afterwards is the saris. He's sterile. Or the katana is an elonit, which is also a woman that she's sterile. So now what happens is that now they did erva, right? Because it's esheta, not bimkom yibum. The entire concept was for yibum. Here you can't do yibum anymore. And he says, Savri, so he holds zil bataruba the ktanim, go after the majority of the children. Verok ktanim, are the majority of children sterile? No. Majority of children, whether it's boys or girls, they can have children. So therefore, right, he comes and he says, go after the majority. So zil batar rok tanot, you're right. Our Mishnah Shittat Rabbi, but according to Shittat Chachamim, a woman can get married to the Shah. Because we're not going to suspect him why, but we're going to say, you know what? She became pregnant, she gave birth. Okay, very good. Says the Gemara, why are you telling us? How are you going to say that our Mishnah is going to Rabbi, that he's choshesh for mute, that he's going to suspect for the minority? Ema Seifa, let's see the Seifa. The Seifa says, if she has a mother-in-law, we're not going to suspect that the mother-in-law became pregnant and gave birth, and now she has a brother-in-law to do yibum. Why? Go after the majority of women. And the majority of the women, they give birth, and they have children. Miut, mapilot, the minority, have apalot, they have miscarriages. V'chol hayordot, and the majority of the when they give birth, mechza zechari, mechza nekevot, right? There's half boys, half girls, right? It's very interesting. Even if this is today, is there still half boys and half girls born in the world? Yeah, it's very interesting to understand. You know, here it says usually, right? A woman that gives birth, it's half males, half females, and that's what we just brought down, right? So he says, right? So 1 second, you already have half females. Then you have a few of them that they have hapalot, that they have miscarriages. So if you put the miscarriages on the side of the females, so now the zecharim become the mute. You understand? So now the zecharim become the mute. So why don't we suspect it then? Right? Why don't we suspect that to prohibit the woman? Right? Because maybe what's going to happen is that maybe she still had a boy, therefore she has to do, meaning the mother-in-law had a boy, and now she has to do yibum. So answers the Gemara, Dilma kevan dichazia lashuk. He says, since right now, right, this woman is becheskat etel lashuk, lo chayish. We're not going to say. Meaning, right now, what is the status quo? She's got a cheskat etel. There's no brothers, so she could get married to the shuk. So we leave her on the cheskat etel. We leave her on the chazakah. She's permitted to go to the shuk. So says the Gemara, reisha dichazek libum tiabem. 1 second. What are the first case? The first case was where the husband went with the tzara to Minat Yam, and then he died over there. And we suspect that maybe the tzara, the co-wife had a boy, had a child, and once you have a child, that's it. So he's almost saying, but what's the chazakah there? The chazakah is that she has to do yibum. So let her do yibum. So says the Gemara, Reisha, the Yisur Karet, Chashashu. The Reisha was an Yisur Karet. Why was it an Yisur Karet? Because maybe the co-wife became pregnant. And therefore they didn't want to rely upon the Heter to do yibum. Why? Because it's Karet. If she goes now with the brother, what's the Yisur? If Be'emet she cannot go with the brother, Yisur Karet, Eshetat. However, the Seifa is you're letting her get married to the Shuk. What type of Yisur is that? Yisur Lav. So Yisur Karet, if a woman had to do yibum, and she didn't do yibum, she went and she got married to a stranger. What is it? It's an Yisur Lav. It's not an Yisur Karet. So says the Gemara, Yisur Lav lo chashishu. They didn't make the chashash. Amar Rava says, Mifti, let us see. Hadoraita, Hadoraita, they're both the right. Right? At the end of the day, they're both the right of Mina Torah. So why are we going to Somali Yisur Karet? Why is it because it's got a stricter punishment, it's got a different halacha? At the end of the day, it's Shtem Doraita. You go lechumra or lechula, but not because of the punishment. So Rava says, Kuv Yutet Amubet, 119b. Reisha Chazaka Libum, Veruba Lashuk. Says 1 second. First of all, the Reisha, which we're talking about, the Tzara went to the husband, Tumdinat Yam, and now we're going to suspect that maybe she became pregnant, she had a baby. We're going to leave the woman on the Chazaka that she has to do Yibum. And the majority of women, Mitabrov Yaldot, Lashuk. Right? So, Chazaka, Lo Adif Ki Ruba. What's better? Chazaka or Ro? Ruba Chazaka, Ruba Adif. So therefore, since the majority of the women, which that's a role, they become pregnant, they give birth. So I'm going to say that overpowers the Chazaka that she should have done Yibum. Now there's a minority of women that have miscarriages. Simok la Chazaka, put it on the Chazaka. So now you have Chazaka plus miut, Chazaka that she has to do Yibum, miut mapilot, and that's going to be greater than the Chazaka. Well, not greater, but half. Half. So what happened? One more time. This woman, she has a Chazaka, she has to do Yibum. The husband has no children, but the husband is married to a co-wife. They go to Dinat Yam, and all of a sudden somebody comes to and says, "Come, the husband died." Now we don't know. Maybe that wife became pregnant and had a child. We don't know. So says the Gemara, Ruba Yeshro Shema Nashim Mitabrot Yoldot. Majority of women, they become pregnant, they give birth. But you have a Chazaka. Chazaka that she's chayavet kibum. Ruba v'chazaka, Ruba adi. Ma yoter chazak, yoter chazak arov. Okay, chazak u'arov. Ruba v'chazak, Ruba adi. Aval yesh kam miut. Ma miut? Miut nashim mapilot. They have miscarriages. So if you have the miut there, which are mapilot, put the miut with the chazaka that she has to do yibum. And now chazaka v'miut lepo b'tzad hazeh. Rov nashim mitabrov yaldot tzad hazeh. עכשיו זה נהיה פלגה או פלגה, חצי חצי. So he says, as lo tilasem lo tidabem. She shouldn't get married to the shuk, she shouldn't do yibum. So says the Gemara, Seifa, and that's why the Mishnah should have said this, right? So it comes now the Gemara and says, the Seifa, he says, is chazaka lashuk veruba lashuk. He says no. The Seifa was the exact opposite case. The Seifa is that are we going to suspect that the mother-in-law is going to give birth? So in the Seifa, the Chazakah is that she should get married to the Shuk, because there's no Yibum, there's no Yavam, and Ruba Lashuk also. Why? Because if the mother-in-law, right, also said, right, that if she became pregnant, right, she's going to have a child. So therefore, right, you also have the Rov. So he says the Tzad Yachid is Babel is Zecharim is muted. That the males is a muted. Why? One more time. What's right now for Chazakah? Chazakah is she should get married to somebody from the Shuk. Why? There's no Yavam. What am I going to suspect? Maybe the mother-in-law is going to have a child. But 1 second. If the mother-in-law has a child, it's half boys, half girls. It has to be a boy in order to do Yavam. So therefore, there also you have a Chetzi. Plus you have, right, the Mapilot also. So because of that, he says it's a mute of a mute. So a mute of the mute, the mute does not suspect for a mute of the mute. Okay, only for one mute, but not a mute of a mute. Okay, only for a minority, but not a minority of a mute. Says the Gemara, Loti Nasem Loti Levem, we're on the 2 dots. Right, Kufutet Amubet, 119b, 2 dots. It says Loti Nasem Loti Levem. She doesn't get married, she didn't do Yibum. Uleola. Says the Gemara, what? Are you going to tell me she can never get married? She can never get married until you find out whether Be'emet, the sister-in-law, had a child or not. So Amar Ziri says, Le'atzma shlosha chodashim. Because to do with her own self, she has to wait for 3 months anyway. Because remember, to find out whether she's pregnant or not. Lachaverta, but for her friend, tisha chodashim, 9 months, right? Because maybe Be'emet, she is, meaning like this. She, right now, if she has 2 witnesses come and say, the husband died. How long does she have to wait to get married? Whether it's yibum or chalitza or to get married to the shuk? 3 months, right? Because she's pregnant. She has to wait 3 months. What about her friend, her co-wife? 9 months. So it says here, 9 months. Why? Because maybe her friend is pregnant, and then the chalitza does not help. The chalitza is not poteret, right? That's what it says here. Because since she doesn't know if maybe the tzarata is pregnant from the husband, she's right. She's not allowed to get married for 9 months. Because if she does chalitza within those months, right, it doesn't help. Okay, even after the first 3 months, it doesn't help. So therefore, the tzarata, if she is pregnant and the blood has been a kayama, it's not a good chalitza. And then, therefore, what happens is the blood himself does not take away the zikah retroactively until he is actually born. So it comes out that if she got married within the 9 months, right, it could be now that if she, it's an isur of that she went to the shuk and she wasn't allowed to. So that's why she has to wait 9 months for the friend. Okay? So he says tisha, and then choletzet imanashach. Then she does chalitza imanashach. Right? Why? Because after 9 months from the death of the husband, for sure the co-wife is not pregnant, right? Or she cannot become pregnant, obviously, right? Or she had an abortion. She had a miscarriage, or she already had a child. So whichever case it is, after 9 months, she's already okay. Because it's either right now she could do chalitza without any problem, or she could do yibum without any problem, or she could do, right, or whatever the case. It's not really yibum. She could do chalitza, right, for sure, without any problem. She could get married to the shuk without a problem. Right? Rabbi Chanina says Latzma is 3 months, Lachaverta leolam, forever. Right? Why? Because until you know whether she had a child or not. So says the Gemara, why? She could do chalitza in manashach. That doesn't matter why. She could do chalitza. Why can't she do chalitza? Why is it for the rest of her life? She can't do anything. So says the Gemara, Abaye bar Abi, Chanina bar Abi, said, Gezerah sheni evlad ben kayma. Maybe it's a gezerah. Maybe the child is going to be a ben kayma. And then you have to start telling everybody that she didn't need to do chalitza and she's permitted to a kohen. We didn't want to do these things, meaning like this, right? Is the chalitza permitted to a kohen? Okay, is a grusha permitted to a kohen? Look, v'isha grusha v'isha lo yikachu. From the vav of ve'isha, what do we learn? Chalutza as well. So grusha v'chalutza asura lakohen. What about an almanah? Almanah is permitted to a kohen? Lekohen gadol asur ve'lekohen idiot mutar. So now what happens if she needed to do chalitza? So chalitza is prohibited to a kohen idiot. What happens if she didn't need to do chalitza? Why? The husband did have a child, so she didn't need to do chalitza, right? So then what is she? She's an almanah. They already did chalitza because they didn't know that the co-wife was pregnant. Then they found out that the co-wife had a child. So now she didn't need to do chalitza. So what do you have to do? You have to start mentioning to the entire world that karoz. Karoz is like, you have to come and you have to start mentioning the announcement. What's announcement? She didn't need to do chalitza. She's permitted to a kohen. We don't want to do it. Because if already she did a chalitza, which means that she's permitted to a kohen, we don't want to come and start saying, you know what? Now you're allowed to do. Right now you're allowed to get married to Kohen because you didn't need to do chalitza. No. We don't like this. Okay? So says the Gemara, the litzcha, what's the big deal? Make that now that they have to do a karos, they have to come and they have to start mentioning and start telling everybody that she doesn't need that she's permitted to a Kohen, but she didn't need to do chalitza. And so the Gemara, sometimes people were at the chalitza. Remember, chalitza is a big deal. Everyone wants to be there. So sometimes they want to be there at the chalitza. But they weren't there when they were mentioning that she didn't need to do the chalitza. And then people are going to say, people are going to say, Kasharu chalitza l'kohen? Is it permitted for a chalitza to get married to a kohen? Which means people are going to get confused. They were there by the chalitza, but they weren't there when they're mentioning that she didn't need to do chalitza. So because of that, all of a sudden people are going to say, it's permitted for a chalitza to get. So because I would know, asur. So now we learned in the Mishnah. Yeah, nitan li ben. So now he comes and says this. So now we learned in the Mishnah to Yudchet Amubet. Nitan li ben in Dinat Hayam. What happens if a woman comes and she said that she had a boy in Dinat Hayam? And then she says, first the son died and then the husband. So she starts to do Yibum. The minute she's going to be believed. Right? Why? Because when she left, we didn't know she had a boy. So therefore she's going to be believed to say that she had a boy and the boy died first. But once she said that the husband died and then the son, which means that she doesn't need to do Yibum or Chalitza, she's not going to be believed. Because when she left here, she had to do Yibum Chalitza. So now she's not believed to exempt herself from Yibum Chalitza. Right? The Chushil Dvarei, we're going to suspect her words. She does Chalitza, no Yibum. So says the Gemara, why don't we suspect also Edim are going to come? They're going to say this. And now she's also going to do the same thing. You're going to start mentioning that she didn't need to do the Chalitza from the beginning. And therefore she was really permitted to a Kohen. Some of Papa says, no, the Grusha, we're talking about that she was divorced from the husband, right, after she got married, right, to this one, which means she was already in Grusha, right? And then, right, so therefore she's already permitted to a Kohen because she's a Grusha. There's no, me, my son, and my husband, we were all hiding in a cave at the time of his death. So therefore, I'm the only one that knows how they died. So since there's no suspicion that witnesses are going to come afterwards, so therefore that's why we're actually going to believe her, and we'd say do chalitza because we're never going to have to come afterwards and start making these, announcements or this. Because if they died in a cave, no witnesses can come and know who died first. So because of that, we're going to leave it like that. Says the Mishnah, Kuf Yutet Amud Mishnah. Shte Yevamot. Imagine right now 2 Yevamot, which means 2 wives, which are sister-in-laws. They come back and they don't have children. They come back from the Natayam. Zo omeret met bali, zo omeret met bali. Each one says their husbands died. Zo asura mipne bala shel zo, vezo asura mipne bala shel zo. Each one is prohibited because of the other brother, which means that even though each one is testifying that their own husband died, and usually they are believed about their own husband, here they cannot be poten from Yibum. And therefore we're going to suspect that both of them are alive, so both of them they have to wait. Why? Because maybe they still have to do Yibum. What happens if one of them has witnesses, one of them doesn't? The one that has witnesses, she's prohibited to get married to the shuk. Why? Because we have to suspect that the other Yavam is still alive. But the one that does not have witnesses, so she's permitted to get married to the shuk because the Edim are testifying about the friend that the husband died. So therefore she's allowed to get married to the shuk. What if one of them has children, one of them doesn't have children? The one that has children, she's permitted to get married to the shuk. The one that does not have children, she's permitted to get married to the shuk. Nityamu. What happens if they did Yibum? They did the Yibum. Yeah? And Metu Ayevamim. The Yevams died, right, without children. Asura l'naseh, they're not allowed to get married to the shuk. Why? Because they still have to suspect that maybe Be'emet, the other husband is still alive. Bilazar says, no, once they were permitted to the Yavam, they're permitted to everyone, which means the fact that you permitted her to get married to the Yavam means that the husband died. So the fact that you're already permitting her to the Yavam, you're permitting her also to the shuk. Because the husband died. We're not going to suspect the husband didn't die. So therefore, that's it. Okay, says the Gemara, Tana, we're going to write Lazdo edim vebanim. Velazdo lo edim velo banim. What happens if one of them had witnesses and children from the husband, and the other one didn't have witnesses, didn't have children from the husband? Shtehen mutarot. Both of them are going to be permitted. Why? Nobody has the katibum. The first one because she has children, and the second one because of the witnesses of the first one that she had the children and she has witnesses. Nityabmu. What happens now if there was Yibum? Umeto Yebamin and the Yevamim died without children. So don't say they're not allowed to get married. Lazar says once they were permitted to Yevams, they were permitted to everybody. What's the reason to be Lazar? Because he holds Sarami. You're going to tell me that the co-wife can come and testify about another co-wife? Or maybe because she's not going to make herself, right, put her foot in it for herself. So therefore, it's a raya that she's not going to be lying. So therefore, we're going to speak to her. The my nafkamina, what's the nafkamina between the two different reasons? Which means like this. Do you say that we're really be'emet one co-wife could testify about another co-wife? And therefore here, that's why we're saying over here, right, that they're going to be believed, right? And she's permitted to everybody in the shul. Or is it because that she's not going to mess herself up? It doesn't make sense for her to mess herself up. Okay? So what is it nafkamina? Says again the Gemara and the Kufkaf Amud Aleph, to get married to the tzara before getting her married. Which means if the husband went with one of the wives, and the tzara stayed here, and now a woman comes from Yam and testifies that the husband died, right? Is she going to be permitted to get married, the friend, before testifying about herself, right? That she herself is going to get married. So if you're going to tell me now that one tzara could testify about her friend, so even though she's going to get married yet, we're going to get her married, right? Through this testimony. But if you're going to tell me it's because if she got married, then she could get married as well. But if she didn't get married, then she's not going to get married. Why? Because now we're going to suspect maybe something's happened. So because of that, what's halacha? And then we're going to try to bring a proof right to the halacha. Have a wonderful day.